Between women, next first report.
Thanks for staying up later. Oliver Stone is with us tonight and tomorrow, and in this first session, we're going to let him catch his breath because he's been about everywhere talking about J.F.K., and for the next half hour or so, if we touch upon that, it'll only be tangentially. We're going to talk about everything other than the J.F.K. movie that we can squeeze into.
Thank God.
squeeze into this half hour. Where do you think your personal sensibility that we see in one way or another in your films, where do you think it comes from? Where do you trace it to?
Psychological question here.
Right off the top.
My roots, huh? God, Bob, that's the worst question you can ask me. I couldn't imagine a worse first question because I would have to psychoanalyze myself. Especially at a time when I'm trying to expand. I think my next movie might involve a woman protagonist. So, you know, I've obviously dealt with things I know. I've dealt with Vietnam first, which obviously influenced my life. I was 18 when I first went over. I was a teacher. I was in the Merchant Marine, and then I went back in the Army. I was in the infantry and in 67 and 8. And obviously it marked me deeply, and came back to this country. I went to jail quickly, and I ended up at film school and tried to translate some of these emotions into film. Did 16mm films, and had a hard time. I wrote a lot of scripts. I wrote about 11 scripts that were pretty much, didn't go anywhere. One of them was Platoon. And around 1976, I started to get some breaks in the film business after about 7 years. And Midnight Express was my first movie. That was sort of based on my own jail experience, too, because I'd been there. And
you were in jail on a marijuana possession charge?
Yeah, and I had an experience of it. And I empathized with Billy Hayes a lot because of the... I felt the Turkish government, I still do, was... It's a theme of injustice. The prison system there is it's probably one of the most barbaric in the world.
When you came back from Vietnam, you were quoted as saying about that time, you came back alienated, angry, your own word, a little paranoid. Obviously, this is the central experience of your life.
You're going to link this to JFK, no doubt.
If we do, it'll be tomorrow.
No, I got back, I think that I was pretty out there. I lived in the East Village for a while. On 9th Street, and I painted the apartment red. Got robbed a few times. Moved down to Houston Street there, and had a broken window. The snow was coming in the winter. Let's put it this way. I tried to deal with it in Born on the 4th of July a little bit. It was like a second war at home. I mean, we were there. We thought it was over. We came back here, and it slammed us in the back of the head. Nobody cared. There was a massive indifference to the problem of the war. What was wrong with the war is that Lyndon Johnson did not fight it democratically. Everybody should have gone. Rich kids, college kids, everybody. It wouldn't have lasted because I think the sons of the senators and the congressmen and the lawyers would have had been at stake. Their lives would have been killed, and their fathers would have called it off, or else something would have been done faster. It was fought wrong. I've said that many times. It had no integrity the way it was fought. And after the war, I think a lot of this came up in a lot of us, where there was a lot of inner rage, but we couldn't communicate it because nobody could really share our experience. It was not like a generational war like World War II where everybody went. It was just us, a group of us, a subculture.
You might not have been a rich kid, but relatively speaking, you had been privileged. You described yourself as you were a Goldwater Republican at one time. Your dad was a businessman. So in a sense, you were different than a lot of your comrades over there.
Yeah, obviously, I had that scene in Platoon when Baker asks him why the hell you came over here. You didn't have to. I did volunteer for combat. I had a romantic sensibility. I also think I had a bit of a death wish. I think I can talk about that. I mean, it's a lot of teenagers are killing themselves in this country now, all over the world. And I think that I was very unhappy at that age. And it was sort of I couldn't do it to myself, and it was a way of, like, I wanted to go to the bottom of the barrel. I wanted to see what it was like. I didn't want any excuses. I didn't want any privileges. I just wanted to be treated like the anonymous GI.
Maybe I finally found it, way down here in the mud. Maybe from down here I can start up again, be something I can be proud of without having to fake it, be a fake human being. Maybe I can see something I don't yet see, or learn something I don't yet know. I miss you. I miss you very much. Tell Mom I miss her too. Chris.
And I got it. I got what I asked for right away.
As horrific as it was, and as much anger as it engendered, it was a necessary experience for you, right? It was a personal crucible. What I've read, you said you were looking for some sort of maybe Jack London experience, a Hemingway experience, thinking about being a mercenary in the Belgian Congo, something to define you, some transcendent experience, and this, tragic as it was it.
I could not live inside the system as I saw it in America in 1965 and 6 when I went to school. It was Yale, a conformity that I found depressing. I think that it's sort of a socioeconomic path that we all followed. We all had to go through these boys' schools and come out an industrial byproduct, and we take our place in the business community, the political community. And I'm telling you, I mean, without being overly critical, a lot of the people that are running the country now stayed on that path. They never questioned themselves. They went right from college into the system. And a lot of them are running this country. I find that pretty depressing. But my life could not go on. I had a nervous breakdown, essentially. I could not go on being that person. I felt like I was a fake person, that there was a third world, that there was people out there that was in the Far East and Africa that were really, life had another meaning for them, and I wanted to share that experience. And my life could not go on as it was.
So you thought you had a nervous breakdown, what, at the age of 18, 19?
Yeah, about 18, yeah.
The character, Chris Taylor, I think was his name, played by Charlie Sheen, is obviously you in Platoon. And the William Dafoe guy, Elias, and the sergeant, the maniacal killer played by Tom Berenger, in effect are in a battle for your soul. You're the young, relatively impressionable guy, and you can see the Charlie Sheen character being drawn in turns, one way or another way. Was that true to your own experience?
Absolutely. I've been criticized a lot by intellectuals and critics for that, but I find that that's the way life kind of works. It did go down that way. When you're a young man, you are impressionable. I went to Vietnam. I thought I was a good person, like everyone thinks they're a good person, and here I was in platoons where we would go into villages with equally decent people who would rape, who would burn, who would steal, and who would kill innocent people who they knew were innocent, or else they justified killing them by saying, well, a gook is a gook, and they're all working for the NVA, and let's kill them all, let's grease them, let's waste them. I think that is a real temptation when you have a gun and you're 18 years old to use it. And I tried to describe that in Platoon, and I was really torn. I did some things that I'm not particularly proud of.
Why the f*** didn't you listen to me?
Do him, man, do him.
What are you smiling at, huh? You want something to smile at, huh? You want something to smile at? Motherfucker! Dance, motherfucker!
Do him.
Dance, one leg! One legged motherfucker! Man, come on, let's go, man.
I did that. I made this person dance. Yeah, I did. It was an older man, actually. He wasn't the one-legged, no, I did stuff like that. There was a lot of anger and a lot of rage.
Did you kill any children? Did you kill?
No, I never killed a child, as far as I know. And there were days that you just lost it. But I did do some good things. I saved some women. I did save a woman from being raped and I think killed. I saved some people from drowning. I mean, getting into heaven is a question of good deeds. I don't know where I stand in terms of it, but I did do some good things, and I also did some things I'm not particularly proud of.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask you to consider this proposition. This experience gave you an insight into a deep truth, which you expressed in Platoon. It won a zillion awards, Best Picture, Best Director. More tellingly, David Halberstam, who was there, among others, said, this is an American classic. This is a real view of what the Vietnam War was about. It has an emotional and practical truth to it. I think he said 30 years from now, people will look upon this and this will be a valid history of what Vietnam was about. So this experience gave you an insight into that truth. But isn't it also possible that it was so traumatic, so character and outlook forming, that other peripheral aspects of the American experience are viewed through this jaundiced prism by you.
Well, I think you could make that argument. Very valid. Sure, you can do. But you would analyze, any artist is subject to that analysis. Your outlook is determined by the way you grew up. But I think you could look at pre-Vietnam, too, and say that the way I grew up was, my parents were divorced at a certain age. The Kennedy assassination happened in the same year. You could say I associate the Kennedy assassination with the end of my innocence. You can always make that argument. I could make the counter-argument that maybe I have good timing, that maybe I'm there, I was put there, that something is coming through me, a force is coming through me, a creative force that allows me to have been there at certain events of my generation that have made me able to witness them and write about them. But when I came back from Vietnam, I went through my own version of, I guess, a countercultural experience. I was doing a lot of, by my own admission, I was doing LSD, I was doing everything that the hippies were doing. I tried to understand what they were up to, but there was no question that Vietnam made me probably darker, but I was dark to begin with, before Vietnam.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Every time we stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Some people, it's not mine. Some people, it's not mine.
Syrup in a cough drop.
5 years ago, the question was asked, isn't your portrayal of the U.S. as the mastermind behind the terror in Salvador fairly anti-American? You say no. It's anti-American foreign policy, it's anti-American government, which is truly one of the worst governments in the world because we're always on the side of repression. We're always on the side of the dictators. Now, one could make a case, and I'm revealing my own political disposition here, one could make a case that that is, if not completely true, it's true in enough cases to be troubling. On the other hand, if somebody sees this quote, and they're trying to evaluate J.F.K. or your other work, and they're kind of a middle-of-the-road person politically, it's easy enough for them to say, here's a guy who says we have a fascist security state running this country. I can dismiss him. Wouldn't you be better able to make your points if your own positions were moderated a little bit? And isn't it easy to dismiss you because some of these things seem so damn far off the spectrum?
You're absolutely correct, and probably if I'm smart about it and I was political and more ambitious, then I would probably, be very, very calculating in my comments. And there are times when I get pissed off like the next guy, and I probably babble on a little too much at the mouth and say some things that I probably come later to regret. But if you knew what I knew about about this American policy in Central America and in Latin America, and if the American public knew it, they would be upset as hell. It's one of the, so much money has been poured down a rat hole to keep, to destroy the legitimate interests of people that want to better their lives. I find it sickening, and I think that when I did that interview, I was expressing my own rage at our Latin American policy. And I think our general policy in the third world.
If there is a fascist police state running this country, how do you function so dramatically, so effectively, in some cases so profitably?
many people besides myself talk about a drift towards fascism in this country. Most recently, I think Michael Thomas had a very interesting article in the New York Observer about it. And he summed it up very nicely. He said, you know, you make fun of Stone and all this stuff, but why don't you go back and listen to what Eisenhower said in his farewell address, which I used at the beginning of J.F.K.
The military-industrial complex.
This is the president of American presidents. This is a World War II hero. And here he is telling the American people right into the camera, beware of your own military-industrial complex. Beware. It's a very significant speech. He is warning us. Here's a man who knew all the presidents, all the generals, all the contractors. He is warning us about them. Don't you think that's bizarre? I mean, why doesn't he just sort of pass away gently?
So to clarify your point, you're not necessarily contending
I'm
that
saying
moment to moment, day to day, that's what runs the country. Only that it's possible that the influence of this shadow government erupts at certain times and affects certain situations.
Hell, Bob, it's worse than that. You know, it's going on. It's going on. Why do you think where's our military aid go? I mean, what are we doing in Salvador? Where do we give our money to? To what police do we give it? To what military? What are we doing in Brazil? What do we do in Argentina and Chile? What are we doing in Mexico? What did we do in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s? You sound a little naive about it. Like, you know, I mean, it's not a football game here with a coach. This is serious. We have really started. The CIA, I think, I can honestly say, is the biggest crook in the world. Far bigger than the mafia. You talk about John Gotti. These mafia people this is small-time stuff compared to what the CIA does. And the BCCI scandal has just hit on some of the iceberg effect of where that money is. Where is the CIA money?
Do you fear for your own life? There are other radical filmmakers, but you're about as radical as someone who has mainstream success can get.
Listen, of course I fear. I feared before I started the JFK movie. Obviously, I'm highly visible, but Marlon Brando once told me if they wanted to get me, they could poison my food, and I'd get sick, and I wouldn't be dead, but I'd be incapacitated for a year. They're very sophisticated. But I fought in Vietnam, and I've seen the face of the enemy. I've seen people trying to kill me, so, you know, I decided a long time ago what I'd be scared of and what I wouldn't be scared of. I am scared of death and disease like everybody else. But this is the right cause, and I'm on the right cause, and I know I'm onto something because there's been so much protest about what I'm trying to do with this movie that I know I must be doing something right. When 3 ex-presidents, Ford, Nixon, and Bush, attacked this movie.
When did Jim Morrison and the Doors first get into your consciousness?
Oh, I always liked Morrison. I always thought he was an avatar of higher consciousness back in the 60s. He was different. He was sexy. He was Dionysian. And his poetry, you see, that film was so criticized, and we put so much of his poetry in as if it was sophomoric poetry, but I think that the poetry is better than that. I think
they were criticized then as pretentious, and the movie was criticized as pretentious.
Yeah, but that was Jim. That was his style. His poetry is apocalyptic, and it reminds me of the symbolist poets of France, Rimbaud, Apollinaire, and Baudelaire. That's the way he communicated, and he had to die young. That was part of the romantic poet aspect of Jim. But I loved the man, and I tried to do justice to him. Obviously, it's a subjective portrait, but I did use his own words in his own songs. I did very little descriptions of my own in that movie.
Before he passed away, Bill Graham was on this show. I don't know if you saw it. And then in an interview published in Details following his death, he said that collaborating on the Doors project was, quote, probably the biggest disappointment of my career. I made a drastic mistake in not challenging the choice of director. Oliver Stone had no awareness of or respect for the times. It hurt me, the fabrication, the sensationalism, so said the rock promoter Bill Graham.
Well, it's certainly Bill's judgment, and he obviously never said it to me. That's, what can I say? That's It's also a valid criticism, but I would say that Bill also had his own idiosyncratic view of the 60s, that it was certainly more Beatles-oriented than Doors-oriented. I don't think that the Doors were really one of his bands, so to speak, something that he felt particularly close to, because they had a very dark side. Jim, to me, was a classic. He's from any era. He goes back to the ancient Greeks. The 60s mean a lot of different things to different people. The Beatles would be Bill's band, or the Grateful Dead. More San Francisco, Jefferson Airplane. A little more San Francisco-oriented. Certainly idealistic. Very important to Bill, and he was a great idealist. And having come from such a dark childhood in Poland and whatever, I think that for him, those few years were like the golden light. And in a sense, he was wearing rose-colored glasses because, you know, Jim was a dark soul, and I don't think he was on Bill's wavelength.
Do you enjoy playing the provocateur? And to a certain extent, even as you act wounded, do you enjoy responding? Here comes the criticism, and I'm ready.
You know, I guess I would tell you that I would say no on the official version, but then maybe the subconscious version, yes. That I am a provocateur. My dad always said, never tell the truth. You're always going to get in trouble, you know. Shut up. And I always, as a kid, I was always like mouthing off a bit because I remember the teachers would, you know, I didn't like the I never liked the teachers that much in schools and stuff, but I was always rebelling.
And here's just one example of the better buys you'll find on
This with us
video.
tomorrow night. Hope to see you then, and until then, see you later.